Maya had been invisible her whole life, a homeless girl surviving in the forgotten corners of Phoenix, sleeping under overpasses, collecting cans in alleys most people avoided. Then, one scorching afternoon, she heard crying near a construction site, a 7-year-old boy, completely blind, separated from his family, trembling with fear in 110-degree heat. She gave him her only bottle of water, carried him miles on her back through the brutal Arizona sun, protected him like he was her own brother. She had no idea he was Eli Garrett, son of the most respected man in the Phoenix Hells Angels chapter. And when she walked into that motorcycle compound with him in her arms, everything changed. Before we continue, if you believe in the power of observation, in trusting your instincts, and in the courage it takes to speak up when something feels wrong, then pause for a moment. Like, comment, share, and subscribe to Black Iron Tales. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from today, because this story will remind you that heroes come in all sizes, and sometimes the smallest voices carry the most important messages. Maya learned early that invisible girls last longer. In Phoenix, where summer temperatures could kill you in hours and the concrete radiated heat like an oven, a 14-year-old girl had mastered the art of disappearing. Not the magical kind, the survival kind. The kind where you know which parking garages offer shade during peak heat, which fast food restaurants won't chase you away from their bathrooms, and which intersections have sympathetic people who might spare change. Her name was Maya, though nobody asked anymore. She moved through Phoenix like a ghost, present but unnoticed, there but unseen. Her home was whatever space the city forgot about. This week it was an alcove behind an abandoned warehouse on the west side, where a broken air conditioning unit provided a trickle of cooler air if you positioned yourself just right. Every morning started the same. Maya would wake before the real heat set in, when the homeless were kicked out of the overnight cooling centers and the streets were still manageable. She'd shoulder her backpack, frayed at the seams, one strap held on with safety pins, and begin her rounds. Cans first, bottles if she was lucky, anything the recycling center would accept. By mid-morning, she'd usually have enough for something small. A $1 menu item if it was a good day, crackers from the convenience store if it wasn't. And here's what separated Maya from the hardness this life carved into most people. She shared. Every time. If she passed someone who looked hungrier, older, sicker, she'd split what she had. An elderly homeless woman who couldn't walk far. A veteran whose hands shook too much to collect cans himself. A stray cat with matted fur and desperate eyes. She'd sit right there on the curb and divide her crackers down the middle, offering half with gentle hands. The kind of tenderness that 3 years on the streets should have beaten out of her, but somehow hadn't. That was Maya's secret. Somewhere between the hunger and the fear and the endless heat, she'd kept her heart soft. The other street people noticed. They'd see her giving her last dollar to someone worse off, see her helping an old man carry his belongings up a hill even though her own backpack was already too heavy. They'd shake their heads and say she wouldn't last. That kindness was a luxury homeless girls couldn't afford. But Maya didn't know how to be any other way. Across town, in a neighborhood with actual grass and working sprinklers, 7-year-old Eli sat in the back seat of his father's truck, his hands running over the Braille book in his lap. They were heading to his weekly orientation and mobility session, the classes that taught blind kids how to navigate the world independently. Eli had been blind since birth. To him, the world was sounds and textures and temperatures. His father's truck rumbled in a specific way that told Eli they were almost there. The air conditioning had a particular hum. His father's voice carried a warmth that meant safety. Marcus Garrett, Eli's father, was the vice president of the Phoenix Hells Angels chapter, a massive man with arms like tree trunks and a presence that made people step aside. But when he looked at his son, all that hardness melted into pure love. "You ready, buddy?" Marcus asked as they pulled into the community center parking lot. "Ready," Eli replied, his face turned toward where he knew his father sat, even though he couldn't see him. The session was in a park adjacent to the community center, a safe, contained area where instructors taught blind children how to use canes, how to navigate obstacles, how to build independence. Marcus walked Eli to the instructor, squeezed his shoulder, and headed back toward the parking lot to wait. That's when everything went wrong. The construction site next to the park had been there for months, a new building going up, workers constantly moving equipment. Nobody noticed when one of the barriers shifted, creating a gap between the park and the construction zone. Nobody noticed when Eli, practicing his independent walking with his instructor nearby but not directly beside him, veered slightly off course. Nobody noticed until Eli had wandered through the gap, his cane tapping against unfamiliar ground, confusion replacing the confidence he'd built. By the time the instructor realized Eli was missing, he'd walked 2 blocks in the wrong direction, following the sound of what he thought was his father's truck, but was actually a similar engine passing by. His cane tapped against sidewalks he didn't recognize. Voices around him were strangers. The temperature told him he was in full sun, not the shaded park. Fear crept into his chest. "Dad?" he called out, his voice small. "Dad?" Nobody answered. People passed, but nobody stopped. 7-year-old boy with a white cane, clearly lost, clearly blind, and Phoenix kept moving around him like he wasn't there. Eli's breathing quickened. He turned in a circle, trying to orient himself by sound, but everything was unfamiliar. His cane hit something, a shopping cart maybe, and he stumbled backward, catching himself but dropping the cane. It clattered away, out of reach. Now he was truly helpless. Maya was 3 alleys deep into the industrial district when she heard it, a sound that didn't belong, thin, frightened, breaking. A child crying. She followed the sound carefully, past dumpsters and chain-link fences, around a corner near a construction site. And there, sitting on the scorching concrete in full sun, was a little boy. His eyes were unfocused, moving but not seeing. One hand reached out blindly, searching. The other covered his face as he sobbed. Maya's heart cracked open. She approached slowly, not wanting to scare him. "Hey," she said softly, kneeling beside him. "Are you lost?" The boy's head snapped toward her voice. His hand reached out, found her arm, and gripped it desperately. "I can't find my dad. I don't know where I am. My cane, I dropped it." Maya looked around and spotted the white cane 6 feet away, partially under a fence. She retrieved it quickly and pressed it into his hands. "Here, I've got it. You're okay." But he wasn't okay. His lips were cracked. His face was flushed red from heat exposure. Phoenix in July could kill you fast, especially a child sitting in direct sun. Maya pulled out her water bottle, the only one she had, half full, warm but drinkable. She'd been saving it for the rest of the day. She twisted off the cap and held it to his lips. "Drink this, small sips." The boy drank gratefully, his small hands coming up to steady the bottle. When he'd had enough, he whispered, "Thank you." "What's your name?" Maya asked. "Eli." "I'm Maya. Can you tell me where you were before you got lost?" "The park, with Miss Sarah. We were practicing walking, and I heard my dad's truck, but it wasn't. And then I was here, and..." His voice broke again. Maya understood. He'd followed a sound, gotten turned around, ended up somewhere completely unfamiliar. She looked at this tiny boy who couldn't see, who was overheated and terrified, and made a decision that would change both their lives. "Come on, Eli. I'm going to help you find your dad." She knelt down and turned her back to him. "Climb on. It's too hot for you to walk, and I know the shaded routes." Eli hesitated only a second before his small arms wrapped around her neck, his legs locking around her waist. Maya stood, adjusted his weight, and started walking. She'd carried heavy things before, bags of cans, found objects worth recycling, but never something this precious, never someone who trusted her completely, whose life might depend on her making the right choices. Maya took the shaded route, walking under building overhangs and through covered parking structures, avoiding the deadly afternoon sun. She stopped at a fire station first. Surely they could help. But when she approached, still carrying Eli, the firefighter took one look at her, homeless, dirty, holding a blind child, and his expression hardened with suspicion. "Where'd you get that kid?" he demanded. Maya's stomach dropped. "He's lost. I found him near the construction site on..." "Stay right there." The firefighter reached for his radio, his tone suggesting he thought Maya was the problem, not the solution. She backed away. She couldn't risk police involvement, not when they might separate her from Eli before she could get him home, not when her homelessness would automatically make her suspect. "It's okay," she told Eli softly, even though it wasn't. "We'll find another way." She kept walking, asked a woman at a gas station who shook her head nervously and hurried away. Asked a store clerk who told her to call the police and wouldn't help further. Hours passed. The sun began its descent toward evening, but the heat barely lessened. Maya's legs burned, her shoulders ached, her water bottle was empty, but Eli's arms stayed around her neck, trusting her completely. Then, near a small grocery store with a radio playing inside, Maya heard something that made her freeze. 7-year-old Eli Garrett, son of Marcus Garrett, remains missing after disappearing from a community center park this afternoon. The boy is blind and was last seen wearing a blue shirt and white cane. Anyone with information, Maya's blood ran cold. Eli Garrett, son of Marcus Garrett. She didn't know Marcus specifically, but everyone in Phoenix knew about the Hells Angels, the motorcycle club that ran parts of the city with their own code, their own justice. Every survival instinct told her to run, to set Eli down somewhere safe and disappear. What would they think when they saw a homeless girl carrying their missing boy? Would they believe she'd found him? Would they even let her explain? Behind her, Eli shifted tiredly. "Maya, are we close?" His small voice, full of trust, made the decision for her. It didn't matter who his father was. It didn't matter what might happen to her. What mattered was getting Eli home to the people who loved him. "Yeah, buddy," she said, adjusting his weight. "We're close." She stopped at a convenience store and asked the clerk where the Hells Angels compound was. The man stared at her like she'd asked for directions to her own execution, but after a long pause, he pointed east and gave rough directions. Maya thanked him and started walking faster now, driven by purpose. Every step brought Eli closer to home. Every block meant his father was one street nearer. The rumble started before she saw the compound. Motorcycle engines, dozens of them, creating a sound you felt in your chest before you heard it. Maya rounded a corner and saw it, a compound behind chain-link fencing lit up like a fortress. Motorcycles everywhere, gleaming chrome and leather, and men. 50, maybe more. Big, hard-looking men wearing leather cuts with patches that told stories Maya couldn't read but understood anyway. They were searching. You could see it in their frantic movements, the phones pressed to ears, the controlled desperation. Maya's feet slowed. Every instinct screamed at her to turn around. But Eli murmured, "Is that bikes? Is that my dad?" And Maya kept walking. She approached the gate, her worn sneakers scraping pavement. A biker near the fence saw her first. His head snapped up, eyes locking on the small figure on her back. "Hey, someone's here!" The effect was instant. Bikers converged from every direction, boots pounding concrete, voices overlapping. The gate swung open. Maya stood there in the harsh floodlights, trembling so hard she thought her legs might give out, but she held Eli tighter. "You're home," she whispered to him. "You're safe." The crowd parted, and a massive man came through. 6'3", built like a mountain, his leather cut marked with VP patches. His face was weathered and hard, but his eyes, wild with fear and hope, locked onto the boy on Maya's back. "Eli," he breathed. "Dad!" Eli's head whipped toward the voice. Marcus Garrett dropped to his knees right there in front of Maya, reaching for his son with shaking hands. Maya felt Eli's weight lift away as Marcus pulled him into his arms, holding him like he might dissolve if he let go. "Dad, I got lost and I was scared, but Maya found me and she gave me her water and she carried me and—" Eli's words tumbled out between sobs. Marcus's eyes lifted to Maya, really saw her for the first time. A homeless girl. You could see it in every detail. Dirty clothes that didn't fit, backpack held together with safety pins, matted hair and dust on her face, skinny in a way that spoke of chronic hunger, swaying with exhaustion, but also the girl who brought his son home. The silence stretched heavy. Maya took a step backward, ready to disappear back into the city. "Wait," Marcus's voice stopped her. He stood, still holding Eli, and moved toward her. "What's your name?" "Maya." "Maya," he repeated it like he was memorizing it. "You saved my son's life." Maya shook her head. He needed help." "Where do you live?" The question hung in the air. Maya's face flushed with shame. Nowhere. I have a spot, but—" Understanding dawned in Marcus's eyes. Then, something else. Determination. "Come with me," he said. It wasn't a request. "You're not going back to the streets." Maya stared at him, unable to process the words. Marcus turned to the gathered bikers. Brothers, this girl walked my blind son through Phoenix in 110-degree heat, fed him her only water, carried him for miles, brought him home when she could have just walked away, when she could have been terrified of us, when she had every reason to protect herself first. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. We're voting tonight. Maya stays under our protection as family. The bikers erupted, not in argument but in agreement, voices overlapping, confirming, supporting. Maya stood frozen as these men, these feared outlaws, decided unanimously that she mattered. Welcome home, kid, Marcus said, his hand heavy and warm on her shoulder. You're not alone anymore. 3 years passed like a dream Maya never wanted to wake from. The scraggly 14-year-old girl transformed into a confident 17-year-old with a future. She finished high school with honors, earned a scholarship, learned motorcycle maintenance from the club's mechanics. She even started volunteering at the community center, helping teach orientation and mobility to blind children, inspired by Eli. And Eli. Their bond only grew stronger. The 7-year-old boy became 10, still blind, still navigating the world through sound and touch and courage. Maya was always nearby, reading to him, walking with him, teaching him that blindness didn't define his limitations. Marcus treated Maya exactly as he'd promised, as family. She had a room in his house, meals at his table, protection from men who'd faced down hell itself for their own. The Hells Angels hadn't just given her shelter, they'd given her belonging. If this story has touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Black Iron Tales. We bring you stories that prove heroism comes in all forms, that courage isn't measured by size or age, and that sometimes the smallest voices carry the most important messages. Tell us in the comments. Have you ever noticed something important that others missed? Your story might inspire someone else. The Phoenix chapter started looking at homeless kids differently after Maya, started noticing the invisible ones, started connecting them with resources, with help, with hope, because one of their own had been invisible once, and a 7-year-old blind boy had needed her at exactly the right moment. Maya's gentle heart, the one that had survived 3 years of street life without hardening, had created ripples far beyond what she could have imagined that day near the construction site. One evening, Maya sat on the compound steps watching the sunset paint the Arizona sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Marcus came out and sat beside her, 2 bottles of iced tea in his hands. He passed her one. They sat in comfortable silence, just watching the day end. You know, Marcus said finally, Eli told me something yesterday. He said he's going to become a teacher for blind kids when he grows up, because you showed him that disabilities are just different ways of seeing the world. Maya's throat tightened. He's going to be amazing at it. He will. Because of you. Marcus took a sip of his tea. You gave him his life back that day, Maya. But you gave him something more. You gave him an example of courage that had nothing to do with sight. You were terrified, exhausted, had every reason to give up. But you kept going. I couldn't leave him, Maya said simply. I know. That's exactly why you're family. The word still made her chest ache. Family. A concept she'd never really understood before this. She'd had places to sleep, but never a home, never somewhere she belonged, never somewhere that would notice if she disappeared. Marcus turned to look at her directly. You know what the beautiful thing is? You saved Eli that day, but he saved you right back. You gave him safety. He gave you a home. Maya smiled, feeling tears prick her eyes. Yeah, he did. Inside the house, she could hear Eli calling for her, probably wanted her to help him with homework or read another chapter of the book they were working through. Maya stood, ready to go to him, ready to show up the way family does. Thank you for watching. If this story reminded you to trust your instincts, to speak up when something feels wrong, and to never underestimate the power of paying attention, please share it. Subscribe to Black Iron Tales for more stories that prove heroes are everywhere. Courage comes in all forms, and sometimes the smallest person in the room has the biggest impact. Tell us in the comments, what would you have done in Maya's place? This story challenges what we think we know about the people society tells us to fear. Motorcycle clubs exist in our imagination as symbols of danger, but Maya's story reveals a deeper truth. These men who society feared were the ones who saw a homeless girl and didn't look away. They were the ones who fought to give her education, safety, and a future. They were the ones who voted unanimously to protect a kid who had nothing except proof that kindness still existed in hard places. Maya had been invisible for years, and nobody saw her. Nobody, until Eli needed her. In that moment of need, her invisibility finally cracked. The truth about homelessness is that it persists because we allow it to, because we've become comfortable not seeing. Because acknowledging these invisible children would require us to do something. Community forms in the most unexpected places, not in institutions or programs, but in the moments when someone looks at another human being and decides they matter. When a homeless girl decides a lost blind boy is worth her only water. When a biker vice president decides that same girl deserves a family. When an entire brotherhood decides protecting one vulnerable child is more important than maintaining distance from society's forgotten. There's profound power in being seen when the world has taught you you're invisible. That's what Eli gave Maya that day. A 7-year-old blind boy saw her more clearly than anyone with perfect vision ever had. He trusted her with his safety, his fear, his vulnerability. And in seeing her, he saved her. Sometimes the people society fears most are the ones who understand protection, loyalty, and family better than anyone else. Sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places. And sometimes, in the brutal heat of a Phoenix afternoon, a homeless girl and a lost blind boy can find each other at exactly the right moment and create something beautiful from their shared brokenness. Sometimes the people who save us are the ones we never saw coming.